Have you ever wondered what happened to David after he defeated Goliath? Most people think his life became a fairy tale, but the truth is, his greatest battle had just begun. That victory, which should have brought him honor, instead sparked a fire of jealousy in King Saul that would chase him for years. The people of Israel sang songs, praising David more than their own king. "Saul has slain his thousands," they sang, "and David his 10,000s. For Saul, those words were a death sentence for David. The king's admiration twisted into obsession, and one day, as David played the harp to soothe him, Saul hurled a spear straight at his head. Not once, but twice, David dodged it, but the message was clear: his life was in danger. The threat became terrifyingly real when Saul sent soldiers to David's home to kill him in his sleep. It was only because of his wife, Michal, Saul's own daughter, that he escaped. She lowered him from a window and tricked the soldiers, buying him just enough time to disappear into the night. In an instant, David went from a national hero to a hunted fugitive. His first stop was the prophet Samuel at Ramah. He thought he'd be safe there, but Saul pursued him relentlessly. God intervened with a miracle, but David knew he couldn't stay. He had to say a heartbreaking goodbye to his best friend, Jonathan. They wept together, knowing they might never see each other again. Jonathan confirmed the terrible truth: his father, the king, would not rest until David was dead. Alone and desperate, David fled to the city of Nob. The priest Ahimelech, seeing his distress, gave him consecrated bread to eat and a powerful weapon, Goliath's own sword. It was a symbolic moment. The very tool of his greatest triumph was now in his hand as he ran for his life. But this act of kindness would have tragic consequences. When Saul found out, he had Ahimelech and all the priests of Nob slaughtered in a fit of rage. From there, David made a critical mistake. He ran to Gath, Goliath's hometown, thinking he could hide among his enemies. But he was recognized instantly. "Isn't this David, the king of the land?" The Philistines whispered, "The one they sing about." Trapped and terrified, David had to act fast. He pretended to be insane, scribbling on the city gates and letting drool run down his beard. It was a humiliating, desperate act, but it worked. The king of Gath dismissed him as a harmless madman, and David escaped once again. His next stop was the cave of Adullam. This was David's lowest point. He was completely alone, hiding in a dark, damp cave, a hero reduced to a hunted animal. He must have wondered if God had forgotten him entirely. But in that darkness, something incredible began to happen. The cave didn't stay empty. Men who were in trouble, in debt, or just fed up with Saul's rule heard David was there and began to seek him out. One by one, they came, until about 400 men had gathered around him. The fugitive had become a leader. The cave was no longer just a hiding place, it was the birthplace of an army. With his new band of followers, David's life in the wilderness took on a new purpose. It became a training ground. He first moved his parents to the safety of Moab, then began a life on the move, always one step ahead of Saul. He even used his men to rescue the Israelite city of Keilah from a Philistine attack. But his good deeds often put him in more danger. After saving Keilah, David prayed, and God warned him that the very people he had just rescued would betray him to Saul. Heartbroken but obedient, he and his men slipped away just before Saul's army arrived. The chase was relentless. In the wilderness of Maon, Saul came so close that only a single mountain separated them. Saul's army was closing in from both sides, and it seemed like there was no escape. But just as the trap was about to spring, a messenger frantically rode up to Saul. The Philistines were invading Israel. The king had no choice but to abandon the chase and defend his kingdom. It was another miraculous, last-minute rescue. Perhaps the most famous encounter happened in a cave at En-Gedi. Saul, seeking a moment of privacy, went into the very cave where David and his men were hiding in the shadows. David's men saw their chance. "God has delivered your enemy into your hand," they whispered. "Kill him now." But David refused. He crept up silently and cut off a corner of Saul's robe, nothing more. His conscience immediately bothered him for even doing that. When Saul left the cave, David called out to him, holding up the piece of cloth. "See, my father," he cried, "I could have killed you, but I did not. Why do you hunt me?" Saul was overcome with shame and wept, admitting that David was more righteous than he was. He blessed David and went home, but Saul's repentance didn't last. Soon, he was back on the hunt with 3,000 elite soldiers. This time, David's spies located Saul's camp at night. With his nephew Abishai, David snuck past the sleeping guards right to the king's side. Saul was fast asleep, his spear stuck in the ground by his head. Abishai begged, "God has delivered him to you again. Let me strike him just once." But again, David refused to harm God's anointed king. Instead, he took Saul's spear and water jug and slipped away unnoticed. From a safe distance on a nearby hill, he called out to Saul's general, mocking him for failing to protect his king. He held up the spear and jug, proving he had been there. Once again, Saul was stunned by David's mercy, confessed his sin, and promised to stop hunting him. But David knew better. He knew Saul's promises were empty. So, he made a difficult, strategic decision. He took his 600 men and went back to the Philistines, this time as a powerful commander. The king of Gath, Achish, welcomed him and gave him the city of Ziklag to live in. For over a year, David lived among Israel's enemies, finally safe from Saul's obsessive pursuit. While David found a measure of peace, Saul's life spiraled into darkness. God was silent, and the king was consumed by fear. His final confrontation came on the slopes of Mount Gilboa, in a battle against the very Philistines who were now protecting David. The battle was a disaster for Israel. Saul was wounded, and to avoid capture, he took his own life. 3 of his sons, including David's beloved friend Jonathan, died with him. When the news of their deaths reached David in Ziklag, there was no celebration. David tore his clothes and wept, not just for Jonathan, but for Saul as well. He composed a beautiful, heartbreaking song, the Song of the Bow, mourning the fall of Israel's king and prince. Despite years of being hunted, David never lost his respect for the man God had first chosen to lead. With Saul's death, David's long, painful season of running was finally over. The path was now clear. He was anointed king over Judah, and eventually king over all of Israel. Those years in the wilderness hiding in caves, leading outcasts, and showing mercy to his enemy were not wasted. They were God's harsh but necessary training ground. Before David ever wore a crown, God forged him in the fires of adversity, shaping a hunted fugitive into one of the greatest kings in history. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as incredible as I do, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into history's most epic tales. See you next time.